Carla Schaefer, designer for Ant's Beads, and I'll be demonstrating how to make an Elizabethan petal bracelet using check glass petal beads. The tools and supplies needed for this project are as follows. I'm going to be using check glass 14 by 13 millimeter petal beads. We're also going to be using a 6 millimeter Swarovski pearl, 11/0 seed beads, a Tila bead. You will also need a toggle clasp, fire line, a nipper tool, and a thread zapper. I believe I failed to mention that we're going to be using an English needle for this project. It's not going to be doing much with fire line if we don't have a needle for it. And the first thing we're going to do is make our little flowers for the bracelet. And as I mentioned before in the video, beginning of the video, that depending on the size of your bracelet, you'll be making 7 to 8 of these. So we're going to make a longer bracelet. So I'm going to make one more to complete my 8 flowers. And we're using a Tila bead. The original pattern that I found online is, as I said, Elizabethan petals, and they used a checkmate. But I'm going to be using a Tila bead, and it works just as well. So the first thing we're going to do is run our needle through with a yard of fire line. I'm going to run it through my Tila bead, and I'm going to give myself a good tail to hang on to. One side of my Tila bead, then I'm going to come back through the other side. And then I'm going to come back up the hole that I started in. And this is going to create like a loop around the Tila bead, and I'm going to knot it. I'm just going to slip my thread through here and make a half hitch knot. And then run my needle back through. So now I have thread coming out of one side of the Tila bead out of each hole. Now that we've got our Tila threaded, I have the thread coming out of opposite sides here on the Tila. We're going to add our petals, and the first thing we're going to do is run 2 petals with the center. And I'm going to pick up 1 petal, and I do have trouble with trying to make sure that these get in the right way. I want this center pearl sandwiched between these 2 petals. So I'm picking this one up from the back side. And the back side is I'm calling the inside the concave side. And on some of these petals, when the finish is kind of a two-tone, they don't really work as well with this pattern. That's why I picked things that had more of an all-over color. So I've picked up 1 petal and the pearl, and then I'm going to pick up another petal. I'm using the concave side on this one. And I'll want them to be sandwiched to sandwich the center pearl, or the center. I'm going to bring these down to the Tila bead. Now I know I have them the right way because they're kind of like a clam almost, and they're covering the pearl. And the first thing we're going to do is we want to work diagonally across this Tila bead. So I'm going to run my thread and needle back through this right here. And this is going to bring the petals up and the center up onto the top of the Tila, kind of at a diagonal. Once you get it all tightened up. And all this will tighten up. It seems kind of loose right now, but it will, as we work it, it'll get tighter. And you can pull the tail thread and your working thread. So now I have the 2 petals and the pearl on. It almost looks like somewhat of a propeller. So I'm going to pick up my next one. I'm going to pick it up upside down, the back side first. If you put them on the wrong direction, you can just take them off and put them on again. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to bring this 3rd petal down to the work, and I'm going to run it through the pearl. I want to run it through the closest end of the pearl that I'm working here. I'm going to bring it up, make sure my threads, make sure we're not twisted around. And the next thing I'm going to do is pick up the next petal. And then I'm coming out of the purl, so I'm going to go back through the Tila, and I'm going to go right here where we haven't, right at the end of the purl there. And I pull it in. Now I've got all 4 of my petals together. I'm going to tighten up the work a little bit here. Get everything to lay right. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to take my thread and run it back through the purl. There are written instructions for this project. You can find them online. This is the Elizabethan petal bracelet, if you need those. Now, I'm going to straighten everything up, work it out here. Now I've got my thread coming out of my purl right above this petal here. So the next thing we're going to do is work the center seed beads around this petal pattern. Now I've got everything in position here. I'm going to kind of put my thumb over the purl. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to run it through. This is coming right out the purl there, down to this petal. And I'm going to run it through the hole right below it, through the Tila bead there, and back up this hole of this petal. And we're going to add our 11-0 seed beads. The first thing we're going to do is add 5 11-0 seed beads. And I'm going to run across from petal to petal. Then I'm going to run my thread back through that Tila again. You're going to make several passes through these Tilas throughout the project, actually. Then I'm going to come right back up the same petal I started in and one of the seed beads. That's going to cause that seed bead to lay flat against the petal. And this is also going to tighten up our petals to our Tila bead. Then we're going to pick up 4 seed beads. And we're going to go down into the next petal. And we're just going to go around going to run my needle through this Tila here. Up through the petal, right above it. Pick up another 4 seed beads. And then we're going to go down into this seed bead and through the petal. This is going to kind of cinch it up here, as you can see. And again, I'm going to go back through my Tila here. As you can see, I'm forming a little circle around the purl. Then I'm going to run my needle back up through this petal, through the seed bead. And this is our last round, so all we're going to do now is pick up 3. So we picked up 5, 4, 4, and now 3. Then I'm going to run it back through that seed bead and that petal. Get your tail thread out of the way. Now you can see that we've got a little round here, but we have gaps where the seed beads are laying flat against the petals, and we're going to go in and fill those in. So I've come through my petal, going to go back through my Tila bead, as you can see here. Bring back up in position, and then I'm going to come up through this petal right above it where my thread's exiting. and through the seed bead. And we're going to pick up one seed bead. And then we're just going to run our thread through those 3. Pick up another seed bead, run it through these 3 here. And all we're doing is filling in those gaps. Pick up one seed bead, run it through those 3 next to it. And one more. And as you go, you can kind of feel all this work tightening up, and you can give it a little tug. Now, what I like to do is go through the round again, maybe once or twice, just for good measure. We're just going to go all the way around. That also kind of fills in where you can see where we've added those beads, and it kind of tightens this ring up. Just come back around, and once you feel like you've got it good run through here, then I want you to run back down through that pearl against the seed bead against the petal, and back to the back of the work. Now, we have completed our flower, but we need to tie everything off. And as you can see, it's much firmer now. And what we're going to do is run some half hitch knots through the work here and tie off with our tail thread. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it back through here. I've come out that petal, so I'm just going over to the next hole of the tila bead, and then I'm going to make a half hitch knot. I'm just going to slip my needle underneath where my connection is with the petal and the tila, and I'm going to do this several times with some knots, half hitch knots. And I'm also going to tie off with my tail thread one around here. You want to try to keep the holes of the tila passable, because this is where we're going to be stringing our bracelet through. So then I'm going to just I've gone through several times and it's all nice and tightened up. I'm just going to take the tail thread and my working thread and tie them off together. You want to make sure that it's not on the top. Make sure you get your knot on the bottom. Got it flipped over my petal there. Just tail fit. These little tails threads are kind of always in the way, seems like. There we go. Just tie it off, and then we're going to zap our threads with our thread zipper, and we'll be able to string our bracelet. I'm going to run my needle back through here just to get it out of the way. And kind of hide that knot in there. And then I'm going to take my thread burner and remove my threads. Now I've got all of my petals, all my little flowers made, and as I said, I'm going to string this one with 7, and that will be our next step, is to show you how to put the bracelet all together. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to thread 2 yards of Fireline onto our needle, and we're going to double it. So I want you to knot the 2 ends together, cut it as close to the knot as you can, and then we're going to burn the thread to the knot and kind of create this little ball there. And then we're going to stitch together our flowers. What we're going to do now is we're going to, just much like we started with the Tila when we were putting the petals on, we're going to run our needle through one side. I'm going to bring the knot almost to the bead, not quite. So I want to be able to get back in it. Oops. My knot needs to stay out. Just going to let it hang out there just for a minute. And then I'm going to run my needle back through the Tila again, up the other side. And then I'm going to run my needle through this loop here to the knot. I'm going to tighten it up and run my needle back through the Tila side there. Now we are ready to string. This is going to hold our thread here. And we're going to be working our petals basically upside down is what we're going to do. And I find that it's much easier to work with if I kind of lay them down and not handle them as much when they get all strung together, because then they kind of get mixed up, tangled up with your thread, because you are working with a yard of double thread here. So in between each flower, we're going to string 11 seed beads. And we're going to go from Tila to Tila on the same side, from petal, from flower to flower, and we're going to work one side at a time. So the first thing we're going to do is pick up 11 seed beads. And then bring those down. And I'm going to string through the next flower. And see how they kind of lay on each other there? We're going to pick up another 11. We're going to continue this for the length of the bracelet. Up one side, and then we'll work down the other. Nope, and as you can see, I have got it going through the wrong side. So you need to watch that, make sure that you're going through the right side. That's the first time I've done that. But just want to slip this back out and start over. Again, just want to work one side of the Tilas at a time. As I said before, it seems better to lay them down and work them. That way you don't get them in the wrong place like I did, because once I threaded that one the wrong way, I had to actually cut my thread because I couldn't get it out. After you've made so many passes through these petals, through those Tilas, it kind of gets tangled up. So as a general rule, it'd be best to lay these down, pay close attention to what side you're going in. So I'm going to string on the last 11 beads for this petal here, flower here. And then we're going to bring it down. And this way, I'm just sure that I get them the right way. Now that we've got one side completely done here, we are going to add half of our clasp. And I always like to work with the loop end of a toggle first, just in case I have to add some extra on the end for the bar. But this is where we're going to work first. And whether or not those seed beads go through that hole or not, I just don't even take account. We're going to add 20 seed beads to make a loop on the end here for the clasp, but I'm going to do half and half. So I'm just going to go ahead, even though they probably will go through, this just depends on the toggle. So as a rule, I'm just going to do half. So I'm going to string 10 11 seed beads. And then I'm going to do half the clasp. And as I said, they do go through, but this way, if you have a toggle that they don't go through, you always have the right amount. And 10. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make this loop here And we're just going to go back down through the other side of our Tila's. So I'm just going to run this through. We're going to repeat this process again with the 11s in between. And bring it down. The 11 O's, but 11 O's in between each flower until we get to the other end, and then we'll add the bar toggle. Okay, I've got them, most of the strands strung back together, and I did have to kind of pick them up one by one on this last round, but I'm going to go ahead and add my last 11. And I'm going to run it back through here. If you find sometimes that the needle's just a little tough getting through those Tila's because of all the passes that you've made, just gently work it through there, and if you need, use a pair of pliers to pull it through. Now that we're back here at the other end, and as you can see, it's all put together, and they do kind of twist around. In fact, when you wear it, the pattern designer actually suggested twisting them before you wear it. And now we're going to add the other half of our clasp, the bar, and I'm going to do 10 beads again. And then half the clasp, and then another 10 beads. Okay. Then I'm just going to run back through this Tila again. And it is getting a little tougher here. Going back through, just going to work it through. And bring this up. The next thing we're going to do is just go back through the work several passes, several times, and make some half hitch knots. I'm going to make a knot here. You want to make sure that you've got your work, you don't have any like loose strands hanging out in there. But I'm just going to make a knot or two. You only want to go under one. There we go. This is what I mean about this thread getting all tangled up in there. Just gotta be careful. Try not to handle it too much while you've got all this loose thread. It'll make you crazy. Make a knot, run it through. I like to go ahead and run it all the way through a strand. I like to knot at the Tila's, but that's just me. You knot it wherever you like. Just make a couple of knots. And I have put together several color combinations for this, and I'll have them listed on the website, as well as the exact measurement of this 7 and the 8 flowers. So you'll know exactly. I did find that the 7 fits more of smaller, say, 6.5 to 7 wrist, and the 8 petals seem to work for the 7.5 and larger wrist. So I'm going to take my thread burner again, and I'm just going to burn my threads off here, and I'll show you your finished product. And as I said, the designer of the pattern also suggested before you wear it that you kind of twist your flowers a little bit around. That adds dimension. And like I said, I've made several of these so far. I've made this one. I made this one for me and a coworker. I've also done a couple of other color combinations that, as I said, I will share. And even some that I haven't worked up, I've come up with some color combos for you, and I will add those as well to the list. And you can find that information at auntiesbeads.com under Elizabethan Petal Bracelet video.